He grabbed the human to humiliate her in front of the station. His arm didn't survive the attempt. We have got 300 years of documented superiority in the Galactic Council records, and that kind of legacy does not build itself on humble pie and self-reflection. But what happened on Celestial Harbor Station? That changed something fundamental in how I see the universe, and more specifically how I see those strange squishy bipeds from Solth. My name is Velkrin, and before you ask, no, I do not have some grand title or impressive rank. I am a logistics coordinator, middle management. The guy who makes sure the food synthesizers do not explode and that the waste recyclers keep recycling. Thrilling stuff, right? But here is the thing about being middle management on a station with 47 different species. You see everything. You hear everything. You become part of the background noise, invisible and forgettable. Celestial Harbor Station floats in the neutral zone between the Korvath Empire and the Zephian Confederacy. It is massive, ugly and functional. 17 decks of gray metal, flickering lights and the constant hum of life support systems that should have been upgraded 6 years ago. We host diplomats, traders, students, and the occasional criminal pretending to be a diplomat. It is chaos held together by regulations and the vain hope that nobody starts a war in the cafeteria. The hierarchy here. Oh, it exists. The Korvathi think they own the place because they are big and strong and can bench press a cargo container. The Zephians float around acting intellectually superior because they have got 4 brains or some nonsense. The Draxil keep to themselves, but everyone knows they are rich, so people kiss their posteriors anyway. Then you have got the Minari, the Quellan, the Haxor Collective and about 40 other species all jockeying for position, all convinced they are special. And then at the bottom of the social ladder you have got the humans. Now I had heard about humans before Kyokonqua arrived. Everyone had. They came from some backwater planet that nobody cared about until they developed faster than light travel about 60 years ago. Earth, they call it. Tiny thing, mostly water, 1 moon, boring yellow star. The planet is ridiculously far from any major trade routes, and from what I understand, they almost blew themselves up about 14 times before they figured out how to play nice with each other. The rumors about Earth were, well, let us just say they were not flattering. Too much gravity, dangerous wildlife, extreme weather, chemical-rich atmosphere that would kill half the species in the galaxy. A death world, basically. And the humans themselves? Weak, fragile, short-lived. They did not have natural armor like the Korvathi, or telepathic abilities like the Zephians, or the regenerative powers of the Quellan. They were just, there, adequate, unremarkable. So when the exchange program brought Kyokonqua to Celestial Harbor Station, nobody paid much attention. Another human student, trying to prove that her species deserved a seat at the big kids' table. She was assigned quarters on Deck 9, given a datapad with station regulations, and pretty much left to figure things out on her own. I first saw her in the main transit corridor on her second day. She was short by human standards, maybe 1.6 meters tall, with dark skin and hair pulled back in some kind of practical knot. She wore the standard gray jumpsuit that all students got, and she carried a worn bag over one shoulder. Nothing special, nothing threatening. She looked around with these wide eyes, taking in the station's architecture, the various species moving past her, the sheer alienness of it all. A group of Korvathi cadets walked past her, and one of them, a particularly thick-skulled specimen named Grux, bumped into her shoulder. Not accidentally, very deliberately. Kai stumbled, caught herself, and said nothing. Grux laughed, that deep, rumbling sound that Korvathi make when they think they are being clever. His friends joined in. Kai just adjusted her bag and kept walking. I remember thinking, poor kid, she has got no idea what she is in for, because that is how it works on Celestial Harbor Station. The strong push around the weak. The established species look down on the newcomers. And humans were the newest, weakest, most irrelevant species in the entire station. Boy, was I wrong. The central hub, as we officially called it, was where everyone came to eat, complain and pretend to socialize. Unofficially, we called it the food pit, and the name was accurate. The place could hold about 300 beings at capacity, with tables and seating designed to accommodate everything from the towering Haxor to the compact Minari. The air always smelled like a confusing mix of sulfur-synthesized proteins and whatever the Quellan considered edible that week. Trust me, you did not want to know. Meal periods were staggered by shift rotation, but the midday cycle was always the busiest. That is when the students flooded in, fresh from their morning classes in xenobiology or interstellar law, or whatever they were pretending to study. I usually grabbed my nutrient paste around 1100 hours, found a corner table, and watched the daily soap opera unfold. You would be amazed what you can learn about station politics by watching who sits with whom. The Korvathi always claimed the tables near the viewport, prime real estate, because apparently staring at the void of space makes their food taste better. The Zephians floated near the upper dining platforms, literally looking down on everyone else. The Draxel had their own private section with actual tablecloths, because of course they did. Everyone else filled in the gaps, creating these weird little ethnic clusters that would make any sociologist weep with joy. And Draxel held court at the largest Korvathi table like he was some kind of warlord instead of a 23-year-old enforcer cadet with daddy issues. Let me paint you a picture of this guy. Draxel stood about 2.4 meters tall, which is big even for a Korvath. His exoskeleton had that deep purple sheen that their species gets when they hit fickle maturity, and his crest ridges were already scarred from what he claimed were training accidents. Sure, buddy. We all believed that. His mandibles clicked constantly when he talked, a nervous tic that he tried to pass off as intimidating. 4 arms, each one thick as a support beam covered in those decorative bands that Korvathi wore to show family lineage. His father was some big shot in the Korvath military, a general or commander or supreme muckety-muck of whatever. That connection meant Drexel got away with basically everything. Harassment, boys will be boys, property damage, high spirits, assault, character building. He surrounded himself with a crew of equally charming individuals. There was Crix, a smaller Korvath who laughed at everything Draxel said like it was the funniest thing in the galaxy. Thonrek, a Haxor, who was too stupid to realize he was being used as muscle. And Zella, a Minari female who had a mean streak wider than the station itself. They were not friends. Not really. They were an entourage, a fan club for Draxel's ego. For 3 weeks, I watched this group make life miserable for anyone they considered beneath them. Smaller species got their food trays knocked over. Exchange students found their datapads mysteriously corrupted. Quiet insults became loud humiliation. Station security did nothing, because Draxel's father made sure they did nothing. The kid was untouchable, and he knew it. Then Kai Okonkwo made the mistake of eating lunch alone. It was day 17 of her stay on the station. I know because I had started keeping track after that hallway incident, curious to see how long she would last before requesting a transfer. She came into the food pit at 11:30, grabbed a tray of whatever the human-compatible synthesizer produced that day, and found an empty table near the back. Not hiding exactly, just existing quietly. She sat down, pulled out a datapad, and started reading while she ate. Her posture was relaxed, her expression neutral. She was not bothering anyone. She was not making eye contact. She was just a student, having lunch, trying to get through her day. I noticed Draxel notice her. His mandibles stopped clicking for a second, and his head tilted in that predatory way that Korvathi do when they spot something interesting. He leaned over and said something to Crix. Crix looked at Kai, then back at Draxel, and that stupid grin spread across his face. Oh no. Draxel stood up, all 2.4 meters of him, and his crew immediately fell in behind him like baby ducks following their mother. Except these baby ducks were looking for someone to terrorize. They crossed the cafeteria with that slow, deliberate swagger that bullies have perfected across every species in the galaxy. My nutrient paste suddenly tasted like ash. I should have done something, said something, but I was middle management, and middle management does not stick their neck out for anyone, especially not for a human nobody who would probably transfer off the station in another week anyway. I am not proud of that moment. Just so we are clear, Draxel and his crew stopped at Kai's table, casting shadows across her meal. She looked up slowly, her expression unchanged, and waited. The food pit got very, very quiet. Well, Draxel said, his voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. His translator chip rendered his words in standard Galactic, but you could hear the sneer underneath. The little Deathworlder is eating all by herself. How sad. How very, very sad. Kai put down her fork, slowly, deliberately. She looked up at him with these calm, dark eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. Can I help you? Help me? Draxel clicked his mandibles in what passed for Korvathi laughter. Oh, that is rich. That is genuinely hilarious. You hear that, Crix? The human wants to help me. Crix chuckled on cue, because that is what Crix did. Thinrick crossed his massive arms trying to look menacing. Zella just smiled, that predatory smile of hers. I am just wondering, Draxel continued, leaning down so his face was closer to Kai's, what it is like, coming from a planet so primitive, so backwards, that your species almost killed itself before figuring out space travel. Must be embarrassing, right? Showing up here, surrounded by your betters, knowing that you are at the absolute bottom of the food chain. Kai took a sip of her water. Are you finished? Oh, that was the wrong thing to say. I could see Draxel's crest ridges flush darker purple. Nobody talked back to him. Nobody dismissed him like he was an annoying insect. His mandibles clicked faster, that nervous tick betraying his anger. Finished? He repeated. No, little human, I am not finished. See, I have been reading about your pathetic little planet, Earth. A death world, they call it. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, dangerous predators. And yet somehow you creatures are supposed to be survivors. Tough. Resilient. He walked around the table, his crew following. 3 other students who had been sitting nearby suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be. The food pit was clearing out fast, but plenty of beings stayed at a safe distance, watching. Nobody wanted to miss the show, but looking at you, Draxel said, I just do not see it. You are small, weak, fragile. You have got no natural weapons, no armor, no claws or venom or telepathic abilities, just soft skin and squishy organs. So I am wondering, what exactly makes you so special? What makes you think you belong here? Kai set down her water. I am not claiming to be special. I am just trying to eat my lunch. Maybe you did not hear me properly, Draxel said, his voice dropping lower. I am asking you a question. When a superior species asks you a question, you answer. That is how things work here. Superior species, Kai repeated, and for the first time I heard something in her voice. Not fear, not anger, something else. Amusement. Based on what metric? Draxel's crest ridges were almost black now. Based on the fact that I could snap you in half without breaking a sweat. Based on the fact that my species has conquered 17 systems while yours was still banging rocks together. Based on the fact that I am standing here and you are sitting down there and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. Actually, Kai said, pushing her tray away and standing up. I am standing now. Does that change your metric? She was so much smaller than him. Standing at her full height, the top of her head barely reached his chest plates. It should have been comical. It should have been pathetic. But there was something in the way she stood, in the way she looked up at him without flinching, that made the entire scene feel wrong. Like we were all missing something important. Draxel noticed it too. I saw the confusion flicker across his face before the anger surged back. You have got attitude. I will give you that. But attitude does not mean anything when you are weak. Okay, Kai said simply. Okay? Draxel repeated. Okay? That is all you have got to say?
What do you want me to say, Kai asked. You have made your point. You are bigger than me. Stronger than me. Congratulations. Can I finish my lunch now? And that right there was the moment Draxel made the worst decision of his life. He reached down with one of his upper arms and grabbed Kai by the collar of her jumpsuit. Just grabbed her, intending to lift her up, to dangle her in the air like a misbehaving child, to humiliate her in front of everyone. It was a classic bully move. I had seen him do it a dozen times to other students. Lift them up, shake them around, drop them, walk away laughing. Except Kai did not lift. Draxel pulled. His arm muscles flexed under his exoskeleton. His mandibles clicked rapidly. He pulled harder, using both upper arms now, gripping her collar with all his strength. Kai did not budge. Not even a centimeter. Her feet stayed planted on the floor like they were bolted to the deck plating. Her expression did not change. She just stood there, looking up at him with those calm eyes, while he strained and pulled and tried with everything he had to lift her off the ground. And then we all heard it. That sound. That terrible, wet, crunching, popping sound that made everyone in the food pit wince. Draxel's upper right arm bent backwards at the elbow joint. Not a little bit. Not a dislocation. The entire arm folded the wrong way, his exoskeleton cracking like someone had taken a hammer to it. The joint completely shattered. He screamed. That high-pitched warbling scream that Korvathi make when they are in absolute agony. His other arm released Kai's collar instantly, and he stumbled backwards, cradling his ruined limb against his chest. His eyes were wide with shock and pain, his mandibles clicking uncontrollably. Kai straightened her collar, brushed off her jumpsuit, and sat back down at her table. I was trying to finish my lunch, she said quietly. Station security arrived approximately 45 seconds too late, which, let us be honest, was probably intentional. Officers Kell and Tarnix, both Zephians who had been dealing with Draxul's nonsense for months.
did not exactly rush into the food pit with weapons drawn. They strolled in, assessed the situation, and called for medical. Draxel was on the floor now, still screaming, his ruined arm twisted at an angle that made even the Korvathi in the crowd look away. Quix and Finrek were standing back, useless and panicking. Zella had disappeared entirely, because of course she had. Nobody wanted to be associated with this disaster. The medical team arrived with a hover stretcher and emergency stabilizers. Chief Medical Officer Yunra, a four-armed Draxel with exactly zero patience for stupidity, took one look at Draxel and started barking orders at her staff. They loaded him onto the stretcher, injected him with enough painkillers to drop a hacksaw, and rushed him toward the medical bay on deck 4. I followed. Do not ask me why. Morbid curiosity, professional obligation, the desperate need to understand what the hell had just happened, all of the above, probably. Officer Kell stayed behind with Kai, asking her questions in that calm, measured way that Zephians do everything. Kai answered each question with the same neutral expression she had maintained throughout the entire incident. No emotion, no guilt, just facts. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Draxel was on the primary examination table, his arm laid out on a support platform while Yenra and her team scanned it with about 17 different instruments. I stood in the observation area, pressing my face against the transparent barrier like some kind of ghoulish spectator. Compound fracture of the upper arm joint, Yenra announced, her voice clinical and detached. Complete separation of the primary exoskeletal plates, severe damage to the secondary muscle clusters, rupture of the hydraulic fluid sacs, nerve damage, extensive bone fragments, embedded in surrounding tissue. One of her assistants, a young Minari named Pip, looked like he might vomit. Can you repair it? Repair it. Yes. Will it ever function at full capacity again? No. Yenra manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the damage in glowing red. This is not a clean break. This is catastrophic structural failure. The joint has been, for lack of a better term, pulverized. We can reconstruct it, install synthetic supports, regrow the muscle tissue, but he will never have full mobility or strength in this arm again. How much force would it take to do this? Pip asked. Yunra paused, her compound eyes focusing on the data. Based on Korvathi bone density and exoskeletal resilience, approximately 4,000 newtons of reactive force. That is roughly the equivalent of, trying to lift 400 kilograms against a fixed immovable object. The room went very quiet. But that is impossible, Pip said. Nothing organic can generate that kind of static resistance. Not without artificial enhancement or cybernetic augmentation. Yunra said nothing. She just kept working, setting bone fragments, preparing the regeneration matrix, programming the surgical drones. But I saw the way her eyes kept flicking to the data readout, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that did not make sense. About 20 minutes later, Officer Kell brought Kai to the medical bay for her mandatory incident report interview. They sat in one of the consultation rooms, and because the walls were only semi-opaque, I could see their silhouettes. I should not have been listening. Privacy protocols, professional ethics, all that good stuff. But I pressed my audio receptor against the wall anyway. Walk me through what happened, Kell said. Draxel approached my table with his friends. He made several comments about my species and homeworld. He asked questions. I answered politely. He became angry. He grabbed my collar and attempted to lift me off the ground. His arm broke. I sat back down and tried to continue eating. But then medical arrived. Kai's voice was steady, matter of fact, like she was describing a trip to the supply depot. Did you strike him? No. Did you use any defensive techniques or training? No. I just stood there. You just stood there, Kell repeated. And I could hear the skepticism in his voice. Yes. I did not move. I did not resist. I simply did not lift off the ground when he tried to pick me up. And why did you not lift off the ground, Miss Okonkwo? There was a pause. Then Kai said, in that same calm voice, because I am from Earth. Our gravity is approximately 9.8 meters per second squared. That is about 2.3 times standard galactic norm. My body mass, combined with my species' natural resistance to gravitational forces, apparently exceeds what his arm could support. Another pause. So you were saying he broke his own arm trying to lift you? Yes, officer. That is exactly what I am saying. Commander Threshy did not summon me to his office. I was not important enough for a summons, but when Officer Kell mentioned that the commander was reviewing security footage of the incident and requesting input from anyone with expertise in station logistics and species integration protocols, I may have volunteered my services. Enthusiastically, The commander's office sat on deck 2, overlooking the main docking bay. It was all dark metal and strategic lighting, designed to intimidate. Threshik himself was a haxor, built like a mobile fortress, with 6 eyes that could track multiple data streams simultaneously. He had commanded Celestial Harbor Station for 12 years, and his reputation for fairness was matched only by his reputation for not tolerating stupidity. When I arrived, Officer Kill was already there, along with Yenra from Medical and Professor Lixin, our resident physicist. The security footage was playing on the main holo screen, showing the entire cafeteria incident from 3 different angles. Velkrin. Threshik acknowledged me with a nod. You were present during the incident? Yes, Commander. I witnessed everything. Good. Watch this. He replayed the footage, slowing it down when Draxo grabbed Kai's collar. We watched frame by frame as Draxo pulled with his upper arms, his muscles straining, his body weight shifting backwards. We watched Kai's feet stay absolutely planted on the floor, her body completely still. We watched the exact moment when physics stopped being Draxo's friend and became his enemy. Professor Lixin, Threshik said. Explain. The professor, a tall Zephian with silver skin that shimmered when he thought hard, floated forward and manipulated the holographic controls. Mathematical equations began appearing around the frozen image of Kai and Draxo. What we are seeing, Lixin began, is a fundamental miscalculation of mass and gravitational adaptation. Draxo applied approximately 2,000 newtons of upward force to Miss Okonkwo's collar. Under normal circumstances, this would be more than sufficient to lift an organism of her size. However, he failed to account for 3 critical factors. He highlighted Kai's body on the screen. Factor 1. Earth's gravitational constant. Standard galactic norm is 4.27 meters per second squared. Earth's surface gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. That is 2.29 times the standard. Miss Okonkwo has spent her entire life developing muscle density, bone structure, and skeletal support designed to function under that pressure. She is heavier than she looks, I said. Significantly heavier. Lixin confirmed. A human of her size has approximately 40% more muscle mass and 60% greater bone density than an equivalent organism from a standard gravity world. Her actual mass is roughly 73 kilograms, but her effective resistance to upward displacement is much higher due to her muscle engagement and center of gravity. He brought up more equations. Factor 2. Biomechanical efficiency. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a high-gravity world with extreme environmental challenge. Their muscle fiber composition, their tendon elasticity, their core stability systems, all of these are optimized for maintaining position and generating force under adverse conditions. When Draxo attempted to lift her, she instinctively engaged her entire kinetic chain, legs, core, back, shoulders. She became, essentially, a biological anchor. Yenra clicked her mandibles in what I had learned was Draxo appreciation. That explains the reactive force. He was not just trying to lift her mass. He was fighting against her entire muscular system, actively resisting displacement. Precisely, Lixin said. Factor 3. Leverage and structural limits. Draxo used his upper arms, which, while strong, are not his primary load-bearing limbs. He created a lever system where his elbow joint became the fulcrum, his upper arm became the lever, and Miss Okonkwo's mass became the immovable load. Basic physics tells us what happens when you apply excessive force to a lever with a fixed resistance point. The lever breaks, I said quietly. The lever breaks, Lixin confirmed. Commander Threshik leaned back in his chair, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence. So Miss Okonkwo did nothing wrong. She did not attack. She did not defend. She simply existed, and Draxo injured himself through his own ignorance. That is correct, Commander, Kell said. And how many other species on this station are similarly unaware of human physiological capabilities? Threshik asked. The silence was deafening. All of them, I admitted. Sir, humans have been treated as weak and insignificant since they joined the galactic community. Their planet is classified as a death world, but most species interpret that as a place that would kill us, not as a place that created survivors. We have been collectively very stupid. Threshik made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. Haxor laughter, if you can call it that. Velkrin, you are hereby assigned a new project. I want a comprehensive analysis of human physiological capabilities distributed to every species on this station. Gravity tolerance, temperature range, atmospheric composition, flexibility, physical strength ratios, everything. I want every cadet, every visitor, every diplomat, to understand exactly what humans are capable of before they make the same mistake Draxol did. Yes, Commander. And Velkrin? Threshik's eyes focused on me with uncomfortable intensity. Include a personal recommendation in that report. Make it clear that underestimating humans is not just foolish, it is dangerous. I left that office with a new appreciation for the quiet human student who just wanted to eat her lunch in peace, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of shame for my own prejudices. The station-wide memo went out that evening. By morning everyone knew. The human who could not be lifted. The Deathworlder who broke a Korvathi enforcer's arm by simply standing still. Kaio Konkwo became a legend overnight. She did not ask for it. She did not want it. But there it was anyway. The food pit looked different 3 days after the incident. Not physically. Nothing had changed about the gray tables or flickering overhead lights or that persistent smell of synthesized protein. But the atmosphere, completely different. Kai walked in at her usual time. 11:30, grabbed her tray and found a table. Within seconds, 4 Minari students shuffled over and politely asked if they could sit with her, not because they pitied her, not because they were doing charity work, because they genuinely wanted to sit with the human who had accidentally made the station's biggest bully eat humble pie through a feeding tube. She said yes, of course. She was gracious about it, asking them questions about their studies, laughing at their jokes, treating them like actual people instead of inferior species. I watched from my usual corner, sipping my nutrient paste, and realized that Kai had been doing this all along, treating everyone with basic respect. It was the rest of us who had failed the test. The Korvathi table near the viewport was notably quieter these days. Krix ate alone, his usual swagger replaced with nervous glances toward the door. Thunrek had requested a transfer to a different station, citing personal reasons that fooled absolutely nobody. Zella still showed up, but she kept her head down and her mouth shut. And Draxil? He was still in medical. Yenra had performed 3 surgeries, installed synthetic joint supports, and started the long process of muscle regeneration. He would recover eventually, physically at least, but his arm would never be the same, and neither would his reputation. His father, the big shot general, had arrived on the station 2 days ago. I happened to be in the docking bay when he came through, all polished armor and military bearing and barely contained rage. He went straight to Commander Threshik's office, probably expecting to pull strings, call in favors, make the whole thing disappear. He left 90 minutes later looking like someone had force-fed him reality. Threshik had shown him the footage, the physics analysis, the medical reports. Everything was documented, official and absolutely damning. Draxil had assaulted a student. The fact that he injured himself in the process did not change that fundamental truth. The general did not file any complaints. He did not demand justice or threaten lawsuits. He just collected his son, once Yenra cleared him for transport, and left the station without another word. The look on Draxil's face as they departed, his ruined arm in a regeneration sleeve, his crest ridges pale with shame. I will remember that for a long time. But the real change was not about Draxil or his crew. It was about how everyone else started seeing humans. Professor Lixon incorporated human physiology into his xenobiology curriculum. The combat training instructors started asking human exchange students to demonstrate techniques adapted for high-gravity environments. The cafeteria synthesizers got upgraded with more Earth-compatible meal options. Small changes. Sure, but they added up. I did my part too. That comprehensive report Commander Threshik assigned me. I threw myself into it like my life depended on it. I researched human history, their evolutionary adaptations, their ridiculous capacity for endurance and survival. Did you know humans can run for hours without stopping? That they are one of the few species that can regulate body temperature through liquid excretion? That they evolved as apex predators on a planet trying very hard to kill them? Reading about Earth changed something in me. All that casual arrogance I mentioned at the start, that thoraxian superiority complex I wore like armor, it cracked. Not shattered, let us not get dramatic, but cracked enough to let some humility seep in. I started actually talking to Kai after that. Real conversations, not just polite nods in the corridor. She told me about Earth, about oceans and mountains and weather patterns that would terrify most species. She told me about human art and music and literature, about a species that turned suffering into beauty and found meaning in struggle. We are not special, she said one day, sitting across from me in the food pit. We are just stubborn. Too stubborn to quit. Too stubborn to die. Too stubborn to admit when something is impossible. That sounds exhausting, I said. She grinned. It really is. A month after the incident, I saw Kai in the training center, working out with some Zephian students. They were struggling with the low-gravity environment, trying to adapt their movements. Kai was helping them, showing them techniques, offering encouragement. Someone asked her why she bothered, why she helped people who had ignored or dismissed her species for so long. Because holding grudges takes too much energy, she said, adjusting a student's posture. And because maybe if we actually try to understand each other, we can avoid more broken arms. Fair point. I learned something important on Celestial Harbor Station. Something that took a 73-kilogram human woman and one idiot bully to teach me. Strength is not about size or natural weapons or how many systems your species conquered. Strength is about resilience, adaptation, and the quiet determination to keep standing when everything is trying to knock you down. Humans have that in abundance. And the galaxy is still figuring out what that means. Me? I am just glad I figured it out before I made Draxel's mistake. My arms work fine and I would very much like to keep them that way.